In Search of the Source, Chapter 10, Looking for Love. We were standing in about a foot of water in a river, in the dark deep in a cave. The men thought this would be a good time to stop and pray. It had been good weather, not too much rain, and a good time for hunting bats. The water level would be down in the cave where the biggest bats live. Though the Falopa like to eat the smaller ones too, they really like these big fruit bats, the ones with a wingspan of 2 and 3 feet. They usually go into the cave through a large cavern at the opening. This time I suggested we go the other way. I didn't flatter myself that they had invited me along on this expedition because of my hunting prowess. More likely, they hoped I would bring my battery flashlight, easier and more efficient than their flaming torches. The cave goes all the way through the mountain, though at the entrance I proposed the opening is very narrow and tight, with a river running in. You have to wade in about 4 feet of water with only a foot of airspace to the ceiling. They had never been that way, which for me was all the more reason to give it a try. We'd made it through the long entrance and found it opened up to a series of large rooms. Though it got broader and shallower, there was nothing to do but keep wading in the water. It was fairly easygoing, and I was a little surprised that they wanted to stop here and pray. Even those who were not prayers by habit or believers at all wanted to pray here. Fine, I thought. Men ought always pray and not faint. This was a good place, and as good a place in time as any. A couple of them let out. It was quite solemn, beseeching God for direction in this unknown place, particularly from anything that might live in it. For a couple of them, I heard the word Sawe, but didn't think anything of it. I'd never heard it before, but at that time there was still a lot of words that I hadn't heard yet. It was later I learned more about the source of their gnawing apprehension. Apprehension means like we're worried about something that might happen. In earlier years, this had been a burying river. In those days, before burying underground became mandatory by law, they had a variety of ways to do it, depending on what they wanted to do with the spirit. In Falopa belief, the spirit of a person is in its bones. After death, it still lingers on with the bones, knows the kind of treatment its body is shown, and thereafter has the power to manifest and work in ways beyond human means. This is one reason people would always show great mourning, besides the normal reasons of genuine bereavement, and why special treatment was given the body. Do you know what bereavement means? Like sorrow, grief. For a person who had lived honorably, an honorable burial was given. They'd place the body up on a platform a little distance from the village. The women would then climb the platform every day with dead branches of leaves, and with dead branches of leaves keep the flies off the putrefying body. Finally, the women would eat it, a part at a time. But for a person who died after being only a nuisance and pain to the village, and whose spirit was not wanted anywhere around, they gave this one no burying at all. Instead, after a little superficial mourning, like pretend sorrow, they would build a platform over a river, this very one, which goes deep into a mountain and disappears, and burn the platform, body and all. When the platform crumbled, it was all swept away into the mountain, flesh, bones, spirit, and all. That river was the one where we were standing now. After praying, we went on. In time, we came upon the bats, hanging upside down from the ceilings, their little red eyes eerily glinting in the flashlight rays. When bats are seen in a Falopa cave, everything else is forgotten. The place erupts with wild excitement, everyone yelling, shooting, and climbing about on the rocks, holding their balance with stalactites and stalagmites. With the wild echo chamber of bats flapping madly and black men yelling at the top of their lungs in the black earth. It becomes a madhouse. Shine the light over there. No, shine the light over here. I hit one. He's in the water. There's one carrying a wounded bat away. Get them. Watch where you're shooting. I'm over here. Falopa bird arrows are multi-pronged. The bows are made of palm, strung with a strip of bamboo. The arrow itself doesn't usually kill, but it impales the bat and brings it down. As it flops around in the water while trying to swim, the hunter picks it up by the shaft of the arrow. Folding the wings back, he removes the arrow and finishes the bat off by bashing its head against a rock. The bats retreated deeper and deeper into the cave, and we kept up the pursuit. The passage narrowed, the water getting deep in places. We kept moving, though I sensed some of that same apprehension I had noted before. Still, the excitement of the hunt kept everybody going. When it finally widened out again, we found ourselves in a huge cavern. We stood on the sandy shore of an underground lake, surrounded by sheer walls. "This is it," everybody said. "No more road." It was true. There was no going around the lake, but we were already drenched in water, so what was the problem? Why not go on? The flashlight beams showed the bats hanging from the ceiling on the other side. I wonder why they would give up now. "Wait a minute," I said. "We don't know about this lake. It may not be very deep." "No," they said. "We don't go in there." "Why not?" "We just don't. We're at the end. No more road." "But the bats, they're right over there. That's what we came for." Nobody moved. I didn't understand it. We'd been in the river. What was the difference between a river and a lake? Finally, I moved in. "I'm just going to see if it's deep," I said. "Maybe it's very shallow." "Don't!" The protest came from all 10. I didn't understand. These were tough men, rugged, ready for anything. We had traversed worse than this before. I got about a quarter of the way out and called back, "It's only sand." The water was up to my waist, and they were watching me with eyes and faces sober, like they were never going to see me again. Falopa people feel very responsible for one another, never letting another go alone on the trail and taking full responsibility if something happens to a traveling companion. I didn't think of it then, but my venturing out alone into this unknown place was laying great stress on them. I continued out to the middle. The water came up to my armpits, and then, as I continued to step ahead, it started to shallow out again. I kept moving and finally came to the shallows on the other side. "Here I am," I called. "It's no problem. Come on." Finally, a Pussy Ali ventured in. A Pussy Ali is only 4'11", but as tough as they come. Shorter than you, Miles. If he were a football player and a coach told him to tackle a Greyhound bus, he'd do it. With his bag half full of bats held aloft in one hand and his bow and arrows in the other, he set out. The skill of swimming is hardly known among the Falopa, even when they don't have their hands full. In a minute or so of careful waiting, he was up to his neck and called out, "Am I halfway?" "Sure," I said. "Come on." The water was black as tar and was up to his chin with his head turned up before he finally hit the gradual upslope and slowly trudged on out. With him safe on the other side, all the rest came across together. One kicked something that moved, which gave him a start, and yelped. Picking it up, he found it to be a human bone. Others found some too. That didn't help to calm the nerves much, but once we were on the far side, there was nothing to do but go on. That was our purpose, in any case. The excitement rose again as we went on hunting bats. We followed them farther into the cave, getting one here and there until we reached a sheer vertical wall in front of us. Off to the side was a hole where the river raced in. There was no going any farther. By then, we'd had enough, so we carefully retraced our steps, came out of the cave, and went home. We were a long way from John 3:16, the verse we'd started working on the day before, but the hunting had been a good morning's diversion. Back at the house, I got all the muck off, went in, took a shower, and had lunch. That afternoon, Hapele met me in the Bible house to resume translation. Carol and I had been living with the people for some 4.5 years at that time, and we were just about to take our first furlough, kind of like a missionary vacation. We'd translated Genesis in first draft and a few other Old Testament passages, but we hadn't translated anything from the New Testament. We still had a lot to learn, and I didn't have the word for love, or for that matter, perish, but I wanted to give it a try, if only just this verse, before we'd leave the area for a year. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. John 3:16. Many call this the central verse of the Bible. It's the bottom line of the whole message in many cases, the bete. Before we settled down to work that afternoon, I still had some questions about what had happened that morning. Hapele, I said, there's something that puzzles me. I know you guys are pretty tough. This morning I saw you all scaling the walls in that cave, scrambling around in the dark without even a flashlight, grabbing those big screaming bats with your bare hands. But what I can't figure out is why everybody was so slow about crossing that little lake. Without a moment's hesitation, he said, Sawe. What is Sawe? You mean, who is Sawe? Okay, who is Sawe? Haven't you heard the legend of the two brothers? I had not, at least not this one. As a matter of fact, I hadn't even heard the word for legend. I'd been trying to get it for some time. I had been taught by our anthropologists that you can learn a great deal about a people from their legends. But up until then, I had not been able to make much inquiry, as I didn't even have the word. Dete felefo is the term, the talk that goes on and on. I wrote it down. Hapele's face became dead serious as he began. There were two brothers who went fishing in a small lake. They made a raft like we do when we fish. The older one stood on it and scooped water onto the shore as fast as he could with a big sago frond. Every now and then he scooped up a fish. The younger brother would grab it before it could squirm back into the lake. After a while, the older brother got tired and said, Hey, younger brother, I'm tired. Let's switch places. You come here and scoop, and I'll go over there and have a smoke. So they changed places. The younger brother was scooping away when the older brother looked up and said, Hey, you're sinking. Sure enough, the raft was underwater, and the younger brother was up to his ankles. You'd better come out, he told him. The younger brother took his sago frond and tried paddling the raft to shore. He paddled for all he was worth, but it wouldn't move. By then the water was up to his knees. Brother, the younger one called out, something's down here. It's got the raft, and it's got a hold of my ankles. It's pulling me in. With that, the older brother flew into action, doing everything he could think of. He threw vines to the younger brother, and they pulled together, but the vines broke. He found a long pole and held it out. They pulled with all their might, but nothing budged. Both of them were yelling and treating each other, panicking. The younger brother was up to his waist and still going down. Then he was up to his armpits, his shoulder, his neck. Finally, when only his head and forearms were above the water, he suddenly ceased flailing. While he still had his mouth above the water, he called out, Brother, coneo, and disappeared. As soon as he was gone, the older brother took off running as fast as he could. He went to the village and his clansmen, calling, Clansmen, Soe has gotten my brother. The clansmen rose immediately to action. Quickly they grabbed the largest pig they had, running it back to the lake, took their axes, split it open, and threw it in the water, yelling, Soe, here's your pig! Hapele stopped. Then he looked at me like he was about to say the most significant part of the whole story. Do you know what happened then? He asked. I had no idea. Nothing, he said. Nothing? Nothing. Soe sucked the man down, and there was nothing he or his brother could do to keep him up. And when the clansmen came and offered him the pig, their best pig, the best sacrifice they had to appease him, he didn't take it. So the man died, I said. He did more than die. He was pulled down into a deep forever. He perished. What? He perished. I wrote it down. Aluia Lepo. It was one of the very words I'd been needing. I was getting somewhere, right on time. But Hapele continued. People don't go near that lake now, he said. They don't fish in it. They don't whisper near it. They don't even make footfalls anywhere around it. He looked at me hard. A man getting sawe lives in that lake. I was beginning to realize how serious that was. I thought you said it was a legend, I said. It is, he said, but it really happened. We both sat silent for a moment. Then I asked, does everybody know that story? Everybody knows it. Does everybody believe it? It happened. This is incredible, I thought. There's a thing in the lake, some creature down there that gets people. It's some weird force, evil, beyond human control. The only thing that might appease such powers of the other world is some sacrifice. A pig is the best thing they've got and a valuable thing, but when they give it, nothing happens. It was a lesson for life, a warning of great and hostile powers in the dark places of this world, and that means by which men can deal with them are only paltry and, in the end, ineffective. But this came with later reflection. For a moment I was still gathering words. What did he say before he drowned? I asked. Coneo. What does that mean? He shrugged his shoulders. It's just coneo. Farewell, I thought. I'd heard the word used in so many ways before. Ever since we'd first come, it was the word we heard more than any other. When we'd meet them for the first time, they'd say coneo, or after an absence, coneo, like hello. Or we'd leave for an extended time, coneo. If Carol or I or one of the children would fall in the mud on a steep slope, they'd be quick to jump down, saying, no, coneo. It seemed to have so many uses, I wasn't sure what it meant anymore. With some things, the closer you look, the more imprecise they are. Carol had been thinking about it too, and had begun to conclude coneo was very possibly the word for love. It started when she had been visiting a jovial old woman across the way. She'd always tell Carol about her children and her first husband. The children were grown by then, and her first husband was dead. The enemies had killed him. She'd had more children than were alive, too. A couple of them she hadn't wanted and strangled them at birth.
What does that mean?
She choked them to death, the babies that she didn't want. And when her first husband died, it wasn't too hard, as she'd never liked him very much anyway. He had been chosen for her, and it wasn't much of a match. The second one, however, was much better. He was a widower, and she was a widow, and they had gotten together. I married that one for coneo, she said. Carol had told me that. What was coneo the word for love? We couldn't be sure. Not yet. Maybe she'd only married him because he was alone. Maybe she felt sorry for him. She did say that she was happy, though, so maybe it was love. That's how it was with this language learning, always getting little bits. We'd kept it on file in our heads. But now, with this story of the younger brother saying coneo with his last words, was it just goodbye? Was it love, like the salutation at the end of a letter? Or was it something deeper, adapting to the relationship and the intensity of the moment? Hapele and I got back to the business of the verse before us. We went over the whole context again, trying to get its great meaning into Falopa. We'd been struggling. So far, I hadn't much call for the word love. When we had encountered it before, We'd worked around it in other ways, but the deepest significance was never needed in any of those places, not like it was here. For God so loved. Both of us were in the dark. Finally, I said, Hepele, would it work if we used the word koneo, for where God cares so much for the world that he sent his son? Suddenly, the lights went on. Yes, he said, that's exactly the right word. We translated the verse, working it over and over until it made all the right sense. I was satisfied and impressed once again by how I had been given the words for which I was searching, and without which we could not move on. It was another case of my thinking I was taking time off to relate with people, this time doing something as far afield as bat hunting in a cave. Yet out of that experience I acquired 3 new words, each deeply significant. Legend, parish, love. The word for legend became a key that opened door after door into the mysteries of the culture. Parish is a word meaning more than just death. Where else would I have found it but in the legend of Salwe? I had to have it in order to translate this verse. It's as central to the verse as the verse is central to the Bible. As somebody had said, the good news has to be bad news before it can be good news. Parish is the bad news. The good news is koneo, the deepest love. The deepest koneo that a man can give is laying down his life for his friends. The deepest koneo that God could give was his son. It was a sacrifice that would offset the strongest of forces that pull a man down. The telling of it was worth our very lives.